Energy Boutique with your energy and ascension forecast for Sunday, August 13th to Saturday, August 19th. So last week, of course, we had the very hyped up, non-performing Lionsgate 88 portal. Now, I know this is very controversial. Many of y'all have stated that other than myself, you only came across maybe one other person talking about how this is just hype, how this isn't an actual portal, how this isn't an actual event that anybody should be hyped up about. I thank you for those that brought to my attention that I'm pretty much the only one out here, considering just these other few people that are speaking the truth, that are keeping it real. I don't want to play into this spiritual new age hype. There is no evidence that anything happened on 8/8 with the Lionsgate portal, other than, of course, we had our last quarter moon in Taurus energy, which was highly significant, seeing as it rooted many of us in our physical bodies, showed us where there was some aches, some pains, some jumbled up energies, and of course illuminated for us where it is that maybe we got to start taking better care of ourselves. And of course, reflecting back over the last month, really piecing a lot of the highs, the lows, the everything in between together, we are bringing something full circle as we're about to move into a brand new lunar cycle. But first, let me just remind you that this past week we were kind of closing out the last days of Venus going through her death. She will be reborn here this week. And of course, the death of any season cycle is very painful, very, very heavy, very weighted. And I think we can all agree that we've had certain situations and circumstances pop off over this last week that has shown us where it is that we're just exhausted, where it is that we're tired of this crap, we're tired of this experience, where we just want something to change, where we feel like we're stuck, we're beating our head against a wall, like we can't just get ahead in life. All of that should be a validation and a confirmation that you're in alignment with the energies. Now, does it feel good? No. Is it supposed to? No. Are we supposed to learn something out of these painful times? Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure we all learned something. In the process of Venus's death, we are learning who and what needs to stay and needs to go. Many of us, again, really struggling with our mental health, with our physical health as well, because those are indicators on where it is that we have to take better care of self. We have to identify where these triggers and activations are putting the funk, laying it on thick in our lives. And of course, from that, we can determine whether or not we can change things up, transform things in any kind of way in order to alleviate the heaviness and the weight that many of us are just breaking under. So what do we got going on this week? Well, we do have the quote unquote Lionsgate 88 portal energy streaming in here on the 12th. Now, I know that this forecast is about the 13th, but we have back-to-back energy events starting with the 12th, then the 13th, then the 16th. We're going to talk about it, but just understand that the energies that everybody was sitting around on 8/8 waiting for, they're coming in on the 12th. They're coming in hot. They're coming in a very intense wave of energy. And again, a lot of that is just because of the sun and being in alignment with the Sirius star that, of course, is downloading us with new information and activation codes that is definitely going to be needed as we move into this week. Why is that, you may ask? Well, because on the 13th, Venus will be reborn. She's going to conjunct the sun. And again, anytime that a planet meets up with the sun, they're infused with a brand new energy. They're like revived. We're starting a new cycle, if you will. And she's about to start her 584-day cycle. She just closed out her 8-year cycle. She just finished closing that last petal of the flower of life that she creates in her orbit. And so when Venus is resurrected, she's kind of re-emerging as the morning star. She's going to be rising before the sun does in the morning. So it's almost like she's leading us into this next chapter. And she's returning with a vengeance. She's re-emerging as her badass, dark, feminine energy self. This is exactly what we need. We need that warrior type of spirit, that, I'm going to say, wrath of a woman, if you will. You ever experienced the wrath of a woman scorned? Whew, Venus is about to tell you all about that. We are going to be more direct in identifying what it is we want, need, and desire. We're going to be more aggressive and assertive in cutting off anything that does not make the cut. And therefore, where we kind of reemerge as this new version of self, the first time we get to understand what this new self looks like is when the new moon in Leo hits on the 16th. Now, granted, the new moon in Leo taking place at 23 degrees, there'll be a whole moon guide, a whole, astro forecast about it in the coming of days. But the new moon in Leo is at 23 degrees, which is more about endings than it is about beginnings. The only beginnings that we are seeing are due to the endings and closures that are right in our face at this particular point in time. Now, Leo energy is the, let's say, ego's way of expressing our soul and our spirit. Because the Leo energy is real and raw and authentic, our truest nature, because we are reemerging as a brand new version of self, this is essentially us realizing what we had to end, what we had to close the door on, what we're bringing full circle, full stop, full completion as far as the cycle goes, in order for us to, again, stand in this new version of self, stand in a new truth, stand in a new mission, stand in a new purpose, and really understand where our energy has shifted and where we are going to focus our energy from here on out. Now, this is the last full week of Leo season. Virgo season is kicking off on the 23rd, which means that there's going to be a lot of heart activations, really piecing together where it is that we are standing in this new strength, in this new pride of what it is that we've gone through, what it is that we've struggled through, where it is that we continue to rise up again and again. So there is going to be heart activations, but not in the sad, depressive way that many of us have kind of been experiencing. That was necessary in order for us to observe where the struggle, the conflict was, in order for us to discern what needs to stay, what needs to go. Again, we're in this whole process of rebirth, of resurrection. So we're definitely going to see a couple of very pivotal days this week where there are going to be resets. Well, what do I mean by that? Of course, when the sun aspects a planet, conjuncts a planet, that is a reset in our egoic expression. When the moon aspects and conjuncts certain planets, that is a reset of an emotional, spiritual cycle. And we have a few resets coming at us this week. Of course, the sun conjuncting Venus taking place on the 13th. That's the resurrection. She very quickly goes into a trine with Chiron, which is healing, which is growth, which is transformation on the spiritual level. We need that. Then we have the moon conjuncting Venus, which of course is going to give her a brand new emotional cycle. It's happening just hours before the new moon in Leo, which should be very telling in nature. We have the sun squaring with Uranus, giving us that tension, that conflict, that breaking point for us to reemerge as this new version of self, literally taking place hours before the new moon in Leo. And of course, the new moon in Leo taking place on Wednesday, the 16th. That is going to be very revealing. We have Mars trining Uranus shortly thereafter, which is just going to be a new inspiration, a new push forward, a new revelation, a new motivation and determination in order to get shit done, for us to move forward in all of the best kind of ways. Now, later in the week, we're going to have the moon and Mercury come together, this time in Virgo energy. That's going to help us fix, solve, and resolve a lot of the lingering issues of reemerging as this brand new self, having a different perspective on ourselves, on the world around us. The Virgo energy is going to help create order where there's been chaos and confusion. The moon then is going to conjunct sit next to Mars, which is going to bring a brand new emotional cycle into play where we are tapping into the warrior spirit and taking action and making moves to fix, to heal, to resolve the issues that, of course, are still being illuminated to us as we reemerge as this brand new sense of self. We're going to end the week off with the sun trining, beautiful interaction, with the North Node in Aries energy. This is going to be a forward movement. This is going to be a plan, a strategy to actually take action and see a forward movement of some sort. This is going to be a very interesting week of refinement. Of course, we're being resurrected, reborn. We have to kind of reemerge in the world, take stock of, what we're seeing from this new set of eyes, what we're feeling from this new sense of heart. And then we're willing out what needs to stay, what needs to go even further. So this is like a realignment, recalibration. This is a refinement week of us to get this new sense of self grounded in, anchored in, before we go into the next weeks that, of course, are going to have us changing seasons and having more planets kind of enter into a retrograde. And, there's a whole vibe. If you want to know what I'm talking about, please go ahead, listen to the August energy forecast if you haven't already, because that gives you a rundown on the astro events that we can expect from the month of August. Okay, so let's address a couple of things before we jump into the Ascension symptoms for this week. First of all, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for liking, for sharing, for commenting. I want to thank you for dropping emojis in the comment section below all of the videos that I'm super grateful you're all tuning into, because all of that is helping the algorithm. All of that is helping to get this information in front of the people that 100% need it. So I want to thank you for your ongoing, continued love and support here on this channel. The community that we're building is super, super beautiful, super helpful, super needed for these crazy, crazy ass times. So I want to thank you so much. I also want to thank those of you, like I already previously mentioned, that kind of commented about my perspective, my take on this Lionsgate 8/8 bull caca. I know that I am a black sheep, even amongst the black sheep. And that's okay. I've gotten used to it. I've spent my whole life like this, so it's not jarring to me at all. But for those of you that made it a specific point to kind of thank me for speaking on these events with logical, practical information instead of the spiritual woo-woo hype, I want to thank y'all for seeing me, for hearing me, for extending those words, that love, that kindness, that support to me, because it can, even though I'm used to kind of dancing to the beat of my own drum, sometimes I wonder if anybody else can hear the music. And it's just an amazing feeling to know that there are very few, but there are people out there that are hearing the jam that I'm over here dancing my little heart out to. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank those of you that jumped over to my Patreon and support me over there. Your love, support is greatly appreciated. Of course, I just released a little bit of a astro rant. I kind of like to put out content. I'm not even sure whether it's an astro class or it's a rant, but I usually try to put out new content on Wednesdays. And this week we talked about a lot to do with the brain. You often hear me talk about systems, structures, and foundations. And a lot of people wanted me to define what that was. And then we started talking about the brain and looping thoughts and how to rewrite the narrative of your trauma and how neuroplasticity and neurolinguistics play into it all and how that's very important understanding before you start to manifest. So I want to thank those of you over on my Patreon that really seem to enjoy that content. And if you're missing out and you're like, oh, I'm not jumping over to Patreon, good news, I have reopened my YouTube membership. Now we're going to see how this plays out. If you've been with me for any amount of time, you would know that I've tried this YouTube membership thing once before and I absolutely hated it. I thought it was doing a huge disservice to those that actually were paying for my bonus content. And so I did have it up for a very short time and then I removed it just as fast. But I've had a lot of people state that, of course, they didn't want to jump over to Patreon for whatever reason. So I did open up the YouTube memberships once again. So over there, you can expect the monthly zodiac forecast for all the signs. You can expect all the astro classes that I have published on my Patreon. It is going to take me some time to kind of upload those videos and release them in a manner that actually supports, the algorithm not blocking me or blocking my content. So we are going to see a little bit of, I'm going to say, patience needed in order for me to get those videos up and released one by one. And you will also gain access to all of the Marley rants that, of course, I had to put over on my Patreon because a lot of them covers topics and themes that'll likely get me in trouble here on YouTube. But again, we're going to try this membership thing out because I feel like there's a lot of people that would really enjoy listening to my bonus content, but don't necessarily want to join Patreon, another platform, in order to do so. I tried to do it on my website, and let me just tell you, I am not a website designer. I am not a back office coder. It seems like it's an overwhelming thing for me to jump into. It's not something I want to do. So I've kind of abandoned the whole website membership thing, and we're going to try it out on YouTube. So if you're interested in accessing all of my other bonus content, please consider signing up to the YouTube membership. You will gain discount codes from that membership as well when I put out, the e-guides for the season. Again, you should still be downloading your Leo e-season guide if you haven't already. We still have some events to go as far as Leo season goes. The Virgo season e-guide will be released here shortly, and when I do, there will be a discount code for my YouTube membership subscribers to get a percentage off of that. And of course, that will apply to the moon guides. That, of course, over the next couple of days, you will see the new moon in Leo moon guide be published. And for my YouTube membership subscribers, you can expect a discount code on that as well. So I'm hoping that the YouTube membership goes a little bit better than it did the last time. I'm hoping that they had a chance to work out their bugs. I'm hoping that they don't flag me for some of the content that I'm choosing to release. And again, we're just going to see how it goes. So I appreciate each and every single one of you that decide to support me in that particular manner, and hopefully the bonus content is entertaining, informative, and just opens your eyes to a different perspective, because that's basically what all my information is supposed to do, is just act as a catalyst for change. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump in and talk about some Ascension symptoms. Now I just want to kind of reflect back, give you a little bit of feedback. Many people this week had a hard health week, meaning there was low-grade fevers, there were sinus infections, there were quote-unquote food poisoning symptoms, there were gut reactions, there were cold and flu symptoms. And a lot of people thought, oh, this got to be the Lionsgate portal, it's got to be the 8-8 energy. No, check the Schumann Resonance. There was nothing to write home about. I'll be very anxious to see what the Schumann Resonance is going to kind of capture for us over the weekend here with the real energies coming in. And if it's anything to write home about, I will be making a post on it for my subscribers just to do a comparison on the hype, the fluff versus real life energy coming into our cosmos. However, I know that with energy fluctuations, especially when many of us are starting to feel like crap, everybody thinks, oh, the energy must be so high. Well, it wasn't. It was not. The reason being for our, I'm going to say, poor health days over this past week, a lot of it was because Venus is in her darkest days. She's in the last days of her death. Do you think that dying feels good? It does not. I've already died, let me tell you. It doesn't feel good. Feels good once you're there, doesn't feel good getting there. Many of us are experiencing the death, the ending, the closure of a cycle. Let's also remember, if you listen to last week's Ascension forecast, I talked about how we all kind of have data packets stored in us from previous downloads that we're refusing to install in our operating system because many of us just are having a hard time processing some of the things going on, and we just are essentially blocking our ability to enlighten ourselves to a new level of awareness because honestly, we're just overwhelmed at this particular point. So many of us holding on to those data packets that need to be triggered and activated. It's not necessarily that we're receiving new light codes, new downloads. It is that we are getting activated and triggered to realize where it is that we're banging our head against a wall with the old, and where it is that we have to forcefully push ourselves into a situation to willingly say, you know what? I'm ready to move forward. Most of the time, it's not because we're bold and brave and courageous. We're not there yet in Leo season. That's coming with the new moon in Leo. Mostly it's because we're tired of the shit show. We're tired of banging our head against a wall. We're exhausted. We don't want to do this anymore. Feeling like hammered shit in so many different ways. We just want to break free of this particular chapter, this particular cycle. And so what we're getting here is we're getting an energetic reaction that the physical body is saying, oh, I need to lay down. I'm done. Okay, do many people, I know this is going to be a weird question, but I'm pretty sure that there's not very many people that die standing up. Usually you hit the ground, you're laying in a fetal position of some sort before you actually die. So energetically speaking, it would make sense that we're all kind of being faced with physical ailments that slows our physical bodies down, and in some cases put us, in bed for a day or two. If you were having severe reactions in your physical body like that, low-grade fever, illness, sickness, whatever, please know that you're about to have a major shift in energy. The energy needs you to slow the physical body down in order to clear out the energetic channels, in order for those data packets to be triggered, activated, downloaded for good, in order to be anchored into your new operating system. So many of us are so busy in this hustle and grind culture that we need to get sick in order to slow our roll and sit down and just give ourselves 2 freaking seconds in order to rest and recover. So if you were absolutely just kind of beat down with health issues this week, please know that you will be feeling better, especially once Venus reemerges as their morning star and kind of brings those part of us back to life. And you are in for a really, I'm not going to say rude awakening, because it's not rude at all. It's a beautiful awakening to your highest vibration of self. You were essentially shedding your skin. Let's talk about the snake, right? The snake, first of all, was not the enemy in the Garden of Eden, okay? The snake is the Kundalini spirit that all of us need to trigger and activate in order to climb those 33 vertebrae of Jacob's ladder in our spine, in order to reach our headspace where our pineal gland just awakens with that milk and honey, that beautiful chemistry, the biology that takes place in our brain fluid, that opens us up to sparks in our brain where new perspectives, new awakenings, new enlightenment actually happens. And so for many people that got actually beat down with the health issues, it's because you were shedding your skin. The snake needs to shed the skin in order to protect itself, to move forward, to strengthen itself. This is what you're going through. This is what we're all going through. We're all going to feel amazingly better compared to some of the lowest days over this past week as we move into this new week. So let's talk about the fact that the achiness might still continue. Why is that? Well, because, Venus, first of all, she's getting resurrected, right? She's being brought back to life. Let me tell you, when the doctors brought me back to life, that was probably the most painful part of my experience thus far. Considering the fact that I had to be in a drug-induced coma for the better part of 2 weeks just so that my body could rest and recover and I could, withhold this human experience once again, let me tell you that a new start, a new beginning, a new body, a new version of self needs a little bit of time to get anchored in. And the aches and pains, the growing pains that come with that, pay attention to your shins, pay attention to your knees, pay attention to your ankles and your feet. That is where fear is stored, but that's also where growing pains take place. We need to strengthen our structures, our foundations. What is that? In our physical body, it's our bones. So we're going to be feeling the aches and pains. We're going to feel, and I'll give you this analogy. You know how when you start going to the gym, man, are you sore? You're achy. You wake up the next day, you can hardly even function. You can hardly even move your body. And you feel like you're going to die and you just want to curl up in a ball and cry. And you're just like, I'm never going back there again. I can't. I couldn't do this to myself again. This is ridiculous. Then all of a sudden you realize that by taking little baby steps and working your body and moving those aches and pains out, that eventually you get to a point where, after a workout or after whatever action you're engaging in that used to hurt you, there's a little bit of achiness there, but it's a good ache. It's a good pain because you're realizing how strong you are. You're realizing what it is, the discipline, the willpower that you had to kind of embody in order to push yourself to do the things that hurt. And sometimes, especially right now, we're doing a lot of things that hurt. And so, the achiness, although coming out on the other end as strength, as willpower, as pride of what it is that we've been able to do, pushing ourselves through the worst parts of it, although that is going to be there, there's still some achiness. There's still some rigidity. There's still some cracking in our joints, in our bones. There's still a need for stretching. There's still a need to continue the repetitious movements in order to keep that muscle tone up so that we're not starting from scratch. And so there is going to be that. However, especially once the new moon in Leo kicks off, and let me just remind you, the days prior to a new moon is the dark phase of the moon. There's no illumination of light in the sky. We're sitting in our darkness. This is where we have to sit in the funk of our emotions and our intuition in order to figure out what it is that we no longer want to experience, where it is that we're closing the door. And again, at 23 degrees, this new moon in Leo is more about what we're closing the door on, what we're closing, what we're just shutting the door and nailing the sucker shut on. It's more about endings and closures that is pushing us to reemerge as this new version of self. And so, you know, the new moon is going to be dark. Here we have this huge blast coming in from the Sirius star. Then Venus kind of, you know, picks herself up, dusts herself off, and she looks up and she realizes like, oh man, I am in a pit. Like I can see the vague like light, you know, from the sky above. I can see the top of this pit on where I got to climb myself out of this. But man, my muscles are going to be sore by the time I get my ass out of this dark pit. And that's okay, because you're strong enough to do it, okay? You're strong enough to do it. So when you find yourself, you know, halfway up this dark pit and you look down and you see how far you've come and you look back up to see how much further you have to go, there is a sense of dread, like, ugh, I wish I wasn't doing this. I wish somebody would just come and throw a rope down and pull me up. Of course, that's the easy way out, but guess what? Nobody's coming. So you got to climb your own ass out of this pit. There should be a sense of pride, looking back, seeing how far you've come. We're in Leo season. It's all about embodying the, I'm going to say, scars and wounds that we've endured through battle, of us continuing to fight for ourselves, for us pushing forward, for us doing what is right. There should be a sense of pride to see how far it is that you've come, and there should be a hella warrior type of determination in order for you to continue going so that you can get out of this pit. There is going to be a battle cry. We're going to have a lot of throat chakra activations, okay? So many of us feeling like there's a lump in our throat, feeling like we got to clear it out. Maybe you're having phlegm caught up in the throat. Maybe you're having a sore throat. This is because we are tired of suffering in silence. This is because we are tired of trying to just push through. So you best believe, just like if you were about to climb a mountain, and many people, if you ever talk to somebody who actually does hiking and like climbs mountains, every single one of them will say that they reach a certain point, normally when they're almost to the top, where they don't think that they can do it, where they honestly sit down and contemplate turning back. And it takes a lot of, I'm going to say, warrior type of spirit in order to talk yourself into continue climbing this tall ass, tough ass mountain. But you best believe that every single person who reaches the peak of that mountain, they're going to scream on the top of their lungs. They are going to scream on the top of their lungs, because that is the battle cry of success, of determination, of motivation. That is essentially what we are going to be working through here this week. So pay attention to your throat space, because the battle cry, again, a couple weeks ago, I encouraged everybody to scream. You might want to do that again this week, but scream in the best ways. When you have something that you've accomplished, something to celebrate, scream it out in the best ways, because you reached the top of the mountain that you didn't think you would ever reach again. So with this pivot point, both with Venus and the new moon in Leo, we can expect the heart activation. So as I previously mentioned, they're going to be a different sort of heart activations. Many of us struggling with pain in our shoulders, pain in our lower back, huge amounts of grief, lumps in our throat, because that is the process of death and dying. This is the process of being reborn. You ever, you know, pay attention to when babies get born, okay? Whether naturally or cesarean section, doesn't matter. What do when the baby first comes into this world? Everybody stops and waits for the cry, okay? Everybody stops and waits for the cry. That's how you bring your soul, your spirit back into your physical form. The first breath that a baby makes in this earth plane is when the soul and spirit anchors into the physical body. Similarly, We are going through a death. We are going through a rebirth. We are coming out of the birthing canal in these final days. You best believe we're going to have the urge to scream. You might even be screaming and crying. That's okay. That's part of coming into this world as this new energy, as this new soul, as this new spirit. So we're going to have a lot of shifting. If you've been listening to me over the last couple of weeks, you would know that Venus's rebirth and then kind of moving into the new moon in Leo, that is the pivot point. That is when we're going to see the change in heart, the change in ideas, the change in perspective, the change in understanding, the change in the path, the change in the direction. But change is scary for a lot of people. Even when you 100% know and want the change, sometimes it is still scary. That's okay. Do you think a baby gets born screaming and crying into this world and isn't a little bit afraid? You know, that's why you swaddle the baby in a blanket and make it feel like it's still within the womb so that it doesn't have a culture shock right away. And maybe you need to do that. Grab yourself a blanket, maybe even a weighted blanket. Maybe you need to wrap yourself up in a cocoon and just give yourself some props on being able to make it through this last tough love life lesson, this last, tough challenge in your life. Maybe you need to swaddle yourself. Maybe you need to nurture your inner child. We're still doing inner child work. There is no better way than to provide safety and security and stability for yourself than to do what you would do if you were trying to nurture and calm and soothe a child. So the shift in head, the shift in heart is going to allow us to make a lot of easier decisions, I would say. So a lot of the reason of why many of us, especially in the last couple of weeks of being in this dark pit, being in our death chapter, why we are kind of sad and somber and depressed is because we know that we have to make changes that we're kind of whiny about and crying about. We wish that we didn't have to make them. And again, may I remind you that sometimes making the right decisions, making the right choices hurt the most. That's okay. It's part of the process. But here's the thing. We were very much in our wounded feminine energy. We were very much the victim, whiny, complaining, crying version of self. Of course, when you find yourself in a dark pit and you don't know how you're going to get out, nobody seems to even know that you're missing. Yeah, that does tend to put you in that particular mood, attitude, and perspective. But what we're doing now is we're rising in our dark feminine energy. Dark feminine energy is powerful. It's nothing to be feared. Again, may I say to you, have you ever seen a woman scorned? The wrath of a woman scorned. That is a saying for a good reason. It is the dark feminine energy. I used this analogy a couple of weeks ago. Forgive me for repeating myself, but I thought it was good. There is this aspect of mama bear syndrome, right? Like if you go after a child or you are doing something to someone's child, that mama bear energy comes out. Is that gentle? Is that feminine? Is that emotional and receptive? No, it is not. It is like, you want to F around, you're about to find out, okay? That is the dark feminine rise in energy. That's what we need. That's what we need to get our shit together. It's what we need to get out of this dark pit. It's what we need to discern who needs to stay and who needs to go. It is what we need in order to be straightforward, in order to communicate what it is that we actually want, need, and desire. It is what we need to be straightforward enough to tell people where to go and how to get there. And that's the phase that we're moving into. Many of us need this phase desperately in order to kind of break away from the funk of feeling guilty for choosing ourselves, for putting our own wants, needs, and desires first. May I remind you that the North Node is in Aries for the next 18 months, which means that this is our selfish era, our villain era, where we need to put ourselves first. The only people that are ever going to think that you are a villain are the people that can't benefit from your weak ass boundaries anymore. So figure it out. Stand in your power, stand in your truth. Let that dark feminine energy rise in every single one of us. Does not matter if you were a man or a woman or a cat or a dog. We all have it in us. It's the dualistic nature that makes up our soul and our spirit. So now we are turning into the dark feminine warrior type spirit in order to get our shit together, get out of this dark pit, cut the people out, cut the elements out that we know that we no longer want to have or experience in our lives, and start putting ourselves first. So this means that we're going to be a little bit quicker in our decision making. Now, granted, Mercury's still in Virgo energy, and we are in the pre-retrograde shadow period, which does mean that we're focused in on the smaller things, and we are having to analyze things and the pros and the cons and the everything in between and all the variables that could happen out of the actions in which we want to take and the consequences that we could face due to the actions that we want to take. There's all of that. But I don't know if you ever met any strong Virgo placements. Once you know, there's no arguing. Okay, once a Virgo placement has made up their mind, there is no convincing them of otherwise. Not happening. Especially when it comes to emotion, especially when it comes to logical, practical thought to back that emotion. We are not messing around. So the quicker decision making is coming at the fact that it's you know what? It's a hard no. It's a hard pass for me. Okay? I don't even care to explain myself. You shouldn't be explaining yourself. No is a final answer. Okay? We have to remind ourselves of that. We have to stand in our power, in our truth. We have to understand that we do not need to explain ourselves. Nobody deserves that from us. A no is a no. It's a hard pass. No, thank you. Please continue. Please move on. That's the kind of vibe that we're in. Quick decisions, straightforwardness, aggressiveness to get ourselves situated. Okay, so we talked last week about the shoulder pain. And a lot of that was carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. Although there's a little bit of a remnant of that kind of moving into this week, we are going to be freed up of a lot of that, especially around the new moon in Leo. A lot of this is, maybe you've been trying to crack your neck and it just wouldn't crack. Maybe there's a kink in it. Maybe you can't turn your head all the way one way to the other or up and down or whatever the case may be. There is going to be a very sudden, very unexpected release of the tension, of the conflict, of the kink, of the weight in which you've been experiencing on your shoulders in your neck space. That's going to be an amazing thing because that means that the energy, again, Kundalini spirit, is rising from that dark pit, moving through all the vertebrae of the Jacob's ladder that is our spine, and reigniting a brand new level of awakening in our crown and our head space. But it's got to get past that neck joint. And it will, for many of us, feel like it's cluster F there, like it's just going to explode there until, again, spontaneous healing. All of a sudden, a release, the kink is gone, the weight is lifted, it's going to feel amazing. So that's going to come with a lot of new ideas, a lot of new epiphanies, again, with the pivot point of the change in heart and the change in head, the change in direction, the change in understanding. A lot of this is a domino effect. The minute that we have a new perceived sense of self, I should say, a new reemergence of our soul, our spirit, our energy, a new change in attitude, new change in mood, that is a domino effect that will essentially remove the energy blockages that have been preventing us from gaining the visions, the insights, the glimpses, the dreams that we need to have in order to understand where it is that we're going. Right now, all you need to know is what you're moving away from. Okay? All these planets are in a retrograde. It is not about identifying where it is that you want to go, although I know that our ego cells would really prefer to do that. What we need to do right now is identify what it is that we're moving away from, what we're ending, what we're closing the door on, what we're bringing to a completion, what we're just, done with. Okay, so it's more about where it is that we're moving away from things than it is necessarily identifying what it is that we're moving to. That is coming, okay? That is coming. It's going to require a little bit more patience. It is coming, but we're in the current chapter right now of deconstructing, disassembling, and removing ourselves out of situations, out of experiences that we've outgrown that we no longer want to be a part of. So with that, again, new pop-off, new ideas, new epiphanies, new change in heart, new change in attitude, new change in mood, you best believe we're going to draw the line in the sand multiple times this week on what it is that we are no longer going back to. So, of course, with all of these energies, we can expect a little bit of pressure in the head. Our crown is wide open, okay? Especially, and let me just say it to you this way, especially as we gain closer proximity to getting ourselves out of this dark pit. Again, I know I used this analogy before, but I'm doing it again. When you've been sitting in a dark place and suddenly you're exposed to the light, it feels like you're a vampire and you're about to combust. It feels like your eyes are about to explode. You can't really adjust to the light. The light is too bright. It feels like it's sucking the life force energy out of you. We are going to be having a lot of head pressure, a lot of achiness, a moving headache, if you will. We've been talking about the ear muffling, the ear pressure. That's part and parcel with it. This week, you can tack on a little bit of sensitivity in our teeth. Because why? Well, because there's new material for us to bite off and chew. There's new ideas for us to kind of percolate on. We are going to see a difference in our teeth sensitivity. Also, a lot of sinus pressure, a lot of, I'm going to say, congestion being noticed. Does this mean that we're all going to just be sick with allergies, cold, and flu? No, but it is coming and going. It is coming in waves. I want you to pay attention to some of the topics and themes that you're focused on that are coming into your face for an awareness at the time in which these symptoms actually pop off. There's a direct correlation there. They're directly related. Let's piece it together. You need to be a detective. You need to align with the curiosity of this childlike spirit and ask why. Why is this happening? Why now? What was I thinking about? What is my body trying to tell me? Speaking of that, we may have bouts of old pain resurfacing. So I'm talking like if you broke your leg 12 years ago, might actually feel like, that stiffness, that rigidity, the joint seizing up could actually illuminate any previous wounds. Now, it is going to be painful for a very short amount of time. And then just as there was a release in our neck in that kink, there will be a release of the pain and trauma out of that particular area of the body that once sustained previous injuries. Now, the reason for this is because, again, we're being reborn. Sometimes we need a reminder of all that we've gone through in order to truly appreciate where it is that we're at and what it is that we had to go through in order to get here. And a lot of that pain in our physical body is trapped cellular memories of the pain and trauma that we're trying to process in our inner realm that we need to be illuminated to in our physical realm in order to truly appreciate the amount of growth that we've been able to endure thus far. So we're at this point in time where the old, the weight, the heavy, the pain needs to be very much in our faces as it dissolves, and we can appreciate the new sense of self, the new lease on life, if you will, because we're no longer being restricted by some of those pains, by some of those traumas, by some of those dysfunctions that have taken place in our physical body. Now, I want to talk about the effect on our sensory perception. So you'll often hear me talk about we're all about input. Our 5 senses, technically 6, if you have spidey senses. Our sensory perception, it's all about bringing information in, right? And that's how we form an opinion, and that's how we form an understanding about the world around us, is due to the sensory experiences that we're bringing in. But the sensory experience is based in our central nervous system. And our central nervous system is electric in nature because we're electric beings. And so when we go through an awakening, when we go through a stage of enlightenment, and in this case, a rebirth, a resurrection, we have to understand that there's got to be a recalibration to our sensory system. So we've been experiencing a lot. We talked about the ears being kind of muffled or feeling like there's been water in one ear over the other. Especially last week, many of y'all really identified that that was really true. And that, once we talked about it and connected it to a certain, let's say, blockage that we've been trying to just ignore or avoid or whatever, there was an epiphany. And when that epiphany happens, the physical symptoms dissipate because you're bringing something into awareness. We have to understand that the physical body only sends us signs and signals when it's got something to tell us that is under the covers, if you will, emotional in nature, energetic in nature. And so this week, although there is pressure in the head, although there is maybe a slight ear muffling continued over from last week, a lot of this is going to be due to the eyes. And again, adjusting to the light, squinting, if you will, trying to make sense out of what it is that you're seeing. Maybe you're having watering in your eyes. Maybe it's itchy eye. Maybe you have a lazy eye. Maybe you're constantly blinking. Maybe it's blurry. Maybe it's too vibrant. Maybe you feel like your eyes are going to explode. I don't know how it's going to manifest for you. But we're moving into a time where things are changing in our inner realms. They're changing spiritually, they're changing emotionally, they're changing energetically. And of course, this is a new lease on life. This is a new perspective on the lives in which we've been living. especially when Venus gets herself out of this dark pit and she gets closer and closer to the top of the earth, of the hole in which she fell in. That light is going to get brighter and brighter. She's going to, be squeamish because she's not used to this light. She's used to living in the dark pit for the last little bit. So we do have to expect there's going to be some sensory experiences, some recalibration, some realignment needed in our sensory experiences, which of course can manifest in all kinds of different ways, such as the ways that I just kind of rattled off. But we're not going to just keep it to the eyes. Our hands, we talked about our hands and all the really silly injuries taking place to our hands and broken nails and, jamming fingers and doors and all of these hangnail situations and cuts and all that. Because again, our palm chakras are coming online where we have the ability to manipulate energy through the receptor and the projector of our hands, of our palm chakras. So, the nose, there's different smells that we're going to be smelling. If you smell dirt, okay, mold, dirt, earthiness, that is due to the dark pit that we're sitting in. That's because we're climbing out of this dirty dark pit. So that would be normal. But it's also an interdimensional bleed. As we kind of raise through the vibrations and frequencies and get higher and higher in those vibrations and frequencies, we reach new levels of vibrations and frequencies that we haven't lived in thus far. Therefore, the dimensions that we are jumping, they bleed together a little bit. There's an overlap. And especially as Venus kind of gets reborn again, the old is going to seem like a lifetime away. The new is going to seem forever away. In this present moment, although not much has changed in our physical realms, everything has changed in our inner realms, which means that we're going to see our lives from a different set of eyes, which is going to have just a huge major impact on how we're bringing new information and data in. Because the information and the data that we're currently bringing in isn't coming from the physical realm, it's coming from the metaphysical realm. Anything outside of the physical is what we're bringing in. So that's energy. And we have a lot of energy coming at us here this week. So we talked a little bit about, the nails of our hands. I want to talk about the changes in our nail beds, maybe rigid, maybe smooth, maybe breaking, maybe brittle. Also with the hair, last week we talked about how the hair is going through changes as well, because that's our antenna. That's our way of picking up the vibration and frequency that we need to be in alignment with. And many of us not in alignment with our higher selves and intuition, not only because, of course, Neptune is retrograde, but because we're in between our old vibration and the new vibration that we're trying to anchor into. And I'll give you the same old analogy of, being in between radio stations. One just isn't clear enough. It's kind of grainy and fuzzy and you're picking up on multiple stations. You go to the next station, it's semi-clear, but it's fading in and out. And so we're in this awkward adjustment period, this phase, if you will, where we're really not anchored into one vibration and frequency. It's like we're cha-cha-chaing back and forth. And this is where the interdimensional bleed comes in. There will be one day where you will be very stuck in the past, and then the next day you'll be very stuck in the future. And then even in the same day, you'll be back and forth and back and forth. This is how we process. This is how we purge. This is how we build ourselves up. This is how we resurrect, rebirth ourselves, reaching new vibrations and frequencies, but needing to go back to the old in order to have the perspective that we have in these new vibrations and frequency, to see the old in a different set of eyes, in a different light. And this is what we will be going through from now until essentially when Venus comes out of her retrograde, she goes direct, which of course takes place early September. So we're on the up and up. But let me just say that we may feel dirty. We may be smelling dirt. We may be smelling that earthy, moldy type of, experience. But we ourselves may feel dirty. Maybe it's because we're oily more than normal. Maybe it's because we're itchy. Maybe it's because we have interdimensional spider webs that we're walking through, right? Whatever the case, it just feels like there's something on us that we really wish wasn't on us. Again, it's a sensory experience. It is this want, need, and desire to cleanse ourselves, to kind of think about a snake when they are actually shedding their skin. You get to that final part. I don't know if you ever watched it. I hate snakes. I know I shouldn't, but I do still get the creepies when we're talking about snakes, but I've seen it. So if I've seen it, y'all should have seen it as well. But when a snake is actually shedding their skin, there comes to be that point, that last little oomph where it needs to break away from the body, and where it's like the remnants, the skeletal remnants of who that snake used to be, that size that it used to be. But it gets to that very, very ending point where we almost want to like interfere and like give it a little tug so the snake doesn't have to work that hard to kind of break free fully from the old. This is kind of where we're at. And that old dirty skin is kind of lingering on us, and it can feel like we need to scrub ourselves down, can feel like you need to wash your hands multiple times, or that your skin is just kind of creepy crawly, itchy, gross. Let it happen. There's nothing you can do about it. This is a transitional phase. Now, itchiness, as you may know, is a sign of healing, and there's going to be a lot of itchy parts. There's probably going to be a moving itch that you're not able to itch. Maybe it's in your head, maybe it's in your ear, maybe it's in your nose, maybe it's in your throat, maybe it's in your stomach, maybe it's under your nails, maybe it's in the part of your foot that you just can't seem to scratch fully. Wherever it shows up, this is an indicator of the energy moving in your physical bodies, and it can bring on the creepy, crawly, yucky feeling of our skin type. But again, should we really want to align with the reasoning behind it, it should make us feel good to have these gross experiences, because it is an indicator that there is some growth, that there is some healing, that there is a definite transformation taking place. The itchiness and also burning, I would say, likely going to take place around our lips, the soft mucosa of our bodies, if you will, the inner lining of our mouth, the, soft skin around our eyeballs, and in the woo-woo areas. Not that I'm going to get technical about it, but y'all know what I mean. That sensitive skin, right? That is going to be itchy. It's going to be burning. This is just another indication that things are changing within us, that the energy is moving, that we're getting to the point where we are sensitive in our emotional state, but we are also wearing a pretty thick skin that we are trying to molt, like the snake, if you will. And so we are going through this transformation as well. And again, kind of ties in with the battle cry, with the throat chakra activations. It's all part and parcel. I do want you to pay attention, though, to where the puffiness is taking place. Many of us have been just packing the water weight on since Cancer season, technically. We moved into Leo season. It's a fire sign. We need to continue to stay hydrated, because in a fire sign, we have a tendency to burn ourselves out, to dry up, all the moisture in our bodies. So we have been putting the water to us, but not sure if you're aware of the stages of dying in our physical bodies, but there's usually puffiness and water retention, and all the fluid kind of moves to different areas of the body. And in the final days before your body actually dies, there's a retraction of that fluid from your extremities, pulling it into the core of the body in order to keep the heart going. And so there's going to be an awareness of like swollen or puffy extremities, maybe fingers, feet, ankles, or whatever, but you're going to notice that it starts moving, it starts shifting. And that is just acting as a defense mechanism in order to keep us alive, as our energy, as our soul space goes through this very traumatic, but very much needed death. So guys, I think that's all that I have to actually speak on this week, what I have to talk about. Hopefully it makes a lot of sense. Hopefully it gives you the confirmation, the validation of your experiences, so that you're not feeling like a nutter out there on the crazy train of life, riding it by yourself. We're all here with you. This is a joint adventure. This is a group community venture, and you're definitely not alone in this. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, for sharing your time, your energy, your space with us here, not only in the chat, but in the comments section on the replay. Again, please drop me an emoji. Let me know you were here. I'm sending you nothing but love. I hope you have a beautiful earthing session. And I really encourage you to cry it out, to scream it out, and to really bring yourself into this brand new world with the, I'm going to say, least amount of pain and trauma on that heart space. And of course, you can get rid of that by just screaming it out. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sending you nothing but love, and we'll talk to you soon.